I started reporting about League of Legends more than 7 years ago. You were rare to find people who could make even a living off of doing this. If they made $3,000 a month, they were fortunate. Now you have players who have been signed to contracts that are worth $3 million a year.
These contracts have developed a lot since I first started in 2013, 2014. I mean, back then, many of the contracts weren't even written. They were verbal understandings. To the extent that they were written down, they were kind of a one-page, like, we will pay you $2,000 a month in order to play on our League of Legends team.
If you look at sort of the history of esports, a lot of the large investments started to come in 2016 and 2017. There are different types of people that invest in companies more generally. There are angels who really have zero expectation that they're going to make their money back. There are family offices who tend to be a little bit more legacy oriented or family-based companies. And then there are venture capitalists, which are the people who take very speculative bets and then they want to return in 5 years. A lot of the people that invested in esports 5 years ago, I would classify in the venture capitalist category.
As the audience was exploding, the opportunity for monetization was exploding, the player value was exploding along with it. There's also a artificial creation of the market where esports became such a hot investment commodity that many teams were raising at fairly high valuations. They had war chests, and if you're a sports team and you have a war chest, where do you want to deploy that capital? Well, it can go into a bunch of different places, but one of them is certainly going to be trying to field the most competitive team you can.
We saw these contracts that were signed by players that entitled them to anywhere from like $2 to $3 million a year, like Sword Art, who signed with TSM for a $6 million contract over the span of 2 years, and Perks, who signed a 3-year deal with Cloud9 that was kind of in the similar ballpark. Both of those players have moved on. Those contracts have since been terminated. And what we've seen this year, at least from what I can tell, is that there's been a slight market correction. And I think a little bit of that is people realizing now with esports, just in general, that this is a massive investment and no one has figured out sort of how to generate a profit.
The early 2010s were really the dawning of the modern era of esports. It's when Twitch became really popular and all of a sudden this content was distributed globally in a really broader scale than had previously been in existence. So that dawning of the modern era came at a time when we were just starting to figure out the digital influencer economy more broadly, and all of these different factors kind of came together and created this nascent ecosystem that had extremely clear potential, but hadn't really figured out what it was yet, hadn't figured out the structure, how to monetize. We're now past that phase, right? We've figured a lot of this stuff out. We know the basic economic models. Teams and other parties in the ecosystem are starting to find success. Certainly the player contract salaries have grown tremendously as a result of all of this. And so where I think we're going is getting to the next level of it, right? So esports fans are still under monetized relative to their traditional sports peers to the tune of roughly $3 to $5 per fan. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. One of them is that it's a harder fan base to monetize. It tends to be more global. And another reason is just that we're not as good at it. There are entrenched systems of monetization within the stick and ball sports world that we haven't quite figured out yet, that we're starting to, and that will change. And then there's also just the broader reality of this whole thing, which is that whenever I talk about esports and where we're at now, I always say we're in roughly the top half of the second inning of this thing. So everyone 40 years old or younger grew up in a world where video games were ubiquitous. That means that well over half the world population did not. And so when it comes to the addressable market of the esports industry, or of League of Legends more specifically, we're only beginning to scratch the surface.